The Omer is an interesting mitzvah. The mitzvah is literally just to count the days. What do we accomplish by counting? And perhaps more importantly, why is it important for us to understand? Welcome back. I'm Gila Ross, host of the Power Up podcast, where we share short, relatable ideas to upgrade and impact our everyday lives. And in this episode, together with the Wednesday night group, we look at some insights we can get from the Omer, including why we lose motivation. The Omer starts on the second night of Pesach, the second Seder night, and it goes all the way to Shavuot. Now, what do? There is a mitzvah. It's actually a very, very simple mitzvah. The mitzvah is to literally count every single day. Now, the question that I want to ask, there's 49 days between Pesach and Shavuot. The question that I want to ask is, what's the point? Like, what do we accomplish by counting? Like, what could possibly be the point of that mitzvah? Any thoughts? I stumped you all. And anyone that's joining us online anyway, you're welcome to respond that way.
To get from one day to the next.
What could we accomplish by, Lindsay? What do you think? What could we accomplish by counting?
To get from one day to the next.
Oops,
like a stepping.
Sorry, the computer. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Hi. Now I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. To get from one day to the next, like each day is like a stepping stone.
Ooh, nice. I like that. I like what you're saying. It's like a stepping stone. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Any other ideas of what it might possibly be? Anyone? What could we accomplish by counting? Accuracy of the days. Okay. So before we go into answering that question, I want to ask you another question. What does it matter? What do we care? Why does it matter? Okay, it's very nice. It's a mitzvah. You count the days. You do count the days. You don't count the days. You're doing it. Like why does it matter that we understand what this time of days is for? So this I think is really, really important. And I may have mentioned it before. So if you have, you may recognize what I'm going to say, which is great. You have an advantage. Now I'll tell you what it is that there is the time, the year, the calendar is not just us going through the year. Right? There is a different energy to the different days of the year. In fact, we're told that just like every single person is unique and every single person has a unique mission, so does every moment, every day has a unique mission. Every moment has a unique mission. In fact, there was a rabbi that said that there's no such thing as two prayers that are the same, right? Because your prayer on a Monday is going to be different than on a Tuesday, because there's a different energy on the Monday. There's different energy on the next day. And we see this in the Jewish calendar, that every single time, every single part of the year has a different energy. And the first time we actually see this, or one of the first times we see this, is in a very interesting story. We're told that Abraham, when he had his guests, right? His guests came into his home, the three angels, and he meets them and he invites them in. He doesn't know they're angels, he thinks they're people, and he prepares a feast for them. And what does he serve them? He serves them tongue. And we're also told that he serves them matzah, right? Like what sort of toast? Yeah, what was that, Joe? Well, so you're asking the question why did he serve them matzah? And the answer, what Joe said, is because it was Pesach time, right? But Joe, what's your question to that is that if you know the timeline, Abraham comes first, way before Pesach. Like, Jews hadn't yet gone down to Egypt. They for sure hadn't come out of Egypt. Like, it's not yet Pesach. Like, why is he serving them matzah, right? So the answer that's given, and this is really the idea that we're trying to get out, is because there is an energy, right? There is an energy, and Pesach time has an energy of freedom, right? And because there is that energy of freedom, Abraham because he was sensitive and he was spiritually in tune, he understood, he felt that the energy of freedom, and therefore he served them matzah, which was representative of that energy, and that energy of freedom is what later came out when God took the Jews out of Egypt, right? So when God could have taken them out of Egypt any time of the year, but he specifically chose them to take them out of Egypt on Passover, because that is the energy of the time, right? So even though before Pesach, so what we see here is that Pesach is not just commemorating that we came into Egypt. Pesach is about, on a deeper level, tapping in to the energy of that freedom. And that's why when it comes to Pesach, there is that idea of tapping into the energy of ourselves and our freedom in our lives. So the idea really here is that, and so how does this, okay, so this applies to the Jewish year, but it also applies to our lives, right? We have moments which have a certain energy, which have a certain opportunity, and the moments can come and the moments can go. There's a story that's told of the Arizal, and he was a rabbi, and one Friday he told his students, he says, come, let's go to Jerusalem. Right, let's go and visit Jerusalem. And the students hesitated. They were like, we're not sure, maybe yeah, maybe no. And afterwards, they were like, you know what, actually we're ready now. And he said, it's too late. We missed that window of opportunity, right? We missed that opportunity of leaving, of going to Jerusalem, because we missed that window. And I think that, if you apply it back to our lives, like sometimes we can see that, right? Like sometimes, you have an opportunity an opportunity comes, or a job or a relationship, right? And we take that opportunity sometimes, and great, but sometimes we don't take that opportunity, and that opportunity leaves. And I'll share with you a story of someone I know when we lived in Canada, and I may have shared the story before, so apologies. There was a person that we knew, a Jew that we knew, who was married to someone who wasn't Jewish, and he wasn't involved in the Jewish community at all. And he had an awakening, right, once. And he felt like, you know what, I should explore my Judaism. And he ignored it, as many of us do, right? You get an awakening, you get this like moment where you feel like, I should do a bit more. And oftentimes what do? We're like, you know what, that's a great idea, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do it the day after. And then like, yeah, and you push it, and it never ends up happening, right? And what happens, and then 10 years later, he had a similar awakening. And he realized to himself, he said, he thought to himself, if I don't take it now, he remembers what happened like 10 years earlier. And he said to himself, if I don't take it, like that happened 10 years earlier and I ignored it, and I'm still where I was 10 years earlier. If I don't take it now, I may never get that opportunity again. And he started to, explore a little bit, learn a bit more about Judaism. His family went through the most incredible journey. His wife became Jewish, his kids converted to Judaism. He's now actually a very cool rabbi in Toronto, Canada. He's impacted many people. But like, it's a crazy thing that you have someone who was able to take that opportunity of that moment, and because they said, you know what, I realized this is an opportunity, and they were able to do something so magnificent about it. I remember someone else that I know, member of some of you may know who it is, but whatever, was that just before COVID, right, in probably January 2020, they had an opportunity to go on an Israel trip, a Seed Israel trip, the Seed Ladies Israel trip, and they were like hemming and hawing, should I do it, shouldn't I do it, should I do it, shouldn't I do it? And she almost was like, no, I'll do it next year. Next year's a better year for me. And in the end of it, she decided, I'll do it then, and she did it. And like, whatever, she came back in February, whatever, a couple months later, COVID hit and the whole world shut down. And it was crazy because like she realized, and whatever, I was like, she told me as well, like had she said, I'll do it next year, she never have gotten that opportunity. Like for sure I wouldn't have gotten it since then. So we have those opportunities. And the flip side of it is that we can't rush time either, right? Again, we see this in the stories of the Torah, because when the Jews were about to come out of Egypt, Bnei Ephraim, the children of Ephraim, there was a certain segment of the tribe of Ephraim that decided, you know what, we want to get out first, right? We want to get out faster. And they rushed and they left Egypt, and they were actually punished for it because they went too fast. And I think, again, it's something that we can relate to in our life is that sometimes if you rush too fast, right? If you don't have patience to go through the process, to do it step by step by step, we end up sabotaging ourselves, right? So basically, the point of all of what we've done so far is that there is an energy to the time, right? Different times of the year and different times of our lives have different energies. And the best way to sort of live our lives is when we tap into those energies and use those energies, right? So that's what I want to sort of discover and talk about tonight is what is that energy of the Omer? What is the energy of the Omer? So what is the energy? So let's go back, and I think we'll discover a fascinating pattern in that happens, that the Omer is, and that we will, and hopefully you'll see that this happens in our life as well. Okay, so let's talk about what happens. The Jews are in Egypt. It's terrible for them. It's absolutely terrible for them. It looks like, you know, there's no end in sight. And what happens is that God brings 10 plagues. 10 incredible plagues, 10 incredible miracles, one after the other. And so that is a great question. How do we tap into the energy and what can we receive and utilize it for? So that's what hopefully we're going to discuss and answer at the end of it, right? There we are in Egypt, experiencing these incredible miracles, 10 plagues, and then God takes us out. It was like something that seemed impossible, right? It seemed impossible. We were never going to break free. We were slaves, right? God took us out in the middle of the day from our oppressors. And then what happens is a week later, we come to the splitting of the sea, and God splits the sea for us, right? So, you know, we're in this impossible situation, and God splits the sea. And we're told that at that point, the Jewish people were on such a high spiritual level. They had such a unique experience with God that later generations, the simplest Jew at the splitting of the sea was on a higher level than later generations like prophets were, right? So they were in incredibly high level. Now, if you're God, what would you do at that point, right? You've taken them out of Egypt, you split the sea for them. What are you going to do next? Drown the Egyptians. What are you going to do for the Jews? And God, that is what happened to the Egyptians that were chasing them. What are you going to do for the Jews? What was the purpose of them coming out of Egypt?
Freedom.
Sorry, freedom. But also, next, what was the next step?
To practice Judaism.
Oh, exactly. Thank you, Lindsay. Is to give them the Torah. What does God actually do? God takes them into a desert, right? Now, what does a desert symbolize? When you hear of desert, what does it sound like to you? What's a desert like? Empty, secluded. Do you think
work hard?
Sorry?
Work hard.
Hard work. I mean, like there isn't much even to do. It's almost like there's a place of like death and darkness and like no growth. It's like harsh, right? Harshness. Like there's nothing. Yes, dark, depressing, and it's like nothing's growing there, right? Why does God take them from this absolute high where they were on Sinai, at the splitting of the sea, and instead of giving them the Torah right the next day, right? Take them to Sinai right the next day or 2 days later, whatever it is, when they're still on that spiritual high, God first takes them to this desert, this cruel, desert, which is symbolic of a place where there's no life, no growth.
To bring it to life, to make it their own.
Oh, yes. So right. Yes, Lindsay, I think you
just need to do that in my own life.
Yeah. So this is a pattern that gets repeated in our life. And let me just explain what Lindsay says, because Lindsay was really on it. What happens is that God took them out of and let's take the Jews at the splitting of the sea, where they were on such a high spiritual level, right? It was great. It's great to be on that high spiritual level. But but it's not real, right? And I'll show you what it's like in our life, right? Sometimes you hear something incredible, or you see something incredible, or you meet someone inspiring, and you feel inspired, and you're like, you know what? This is the new me, right? This is the new me. And you're like, I'm going to be that person who only talks positive things, or I'm going to be that person who only sees the good in other people. I'm going to see that person who has that faith in God, right? And you do that, right? For day one, maybe even day two. And then what is inevitable that is going to happen next? What happens next?
Bubble bursts.
The bubble bursts. Yes, reality hits. And what do most of us feel at that point?
Deflated.
We feel deflated, low. Would it be correct to say that we feel like, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah, use a bit of direction.
Yeah, we feel like, what am I doing wrong? You know, I was so excited. I so wanted to do this. And look, I failed, right? We don't understand the pattern. And I don't know if anyone here has ever, you know, taught a child, watched a child learn to walk, or taught a child to ride a bike. Let's talk about a child learning to walk. So if you can get into the mind of a baby, right, that is learning to walk. So how does the baby learn to walk? You know, an adult will hold the child's hand, and the child feels like, wow, this is amazing, I'm walking. And what does the loving adult do at that point while the kid feels so on top of the world that they're able to walk? What does the adult do? The adult lets go. What happens to the child when the adult lets go?
There you go.
Baby falls, right? Now, if we could get into the mind of the baby would feel like, you know, you can imagine the baby feeling like, why'd you do this to me? Like, how could you do this to me? Like, I was walking, I was doing so well. If you love me, how could you treat me like that, right? And what would we respond to the child, the baby? We say, precisely because we love you, we let go. Because we, as the adult, know that the only way that baby is going to learn to walk is when we let go. And yes, part of that process of learning to walk is falling down, right? So let's relate it back to ourselves, right? There is a pattern and a process, and this started at coming out of Egypt on our journey to Sinai, and it's a process that happens in 3 phases, and it repeats in our lives in so many different areas, right? And that pattern is that we have a moment of inspiration. And that moment of inspiration, which we love those moments of inspiration. They feel amazing, right? It feels so good. We feel connected. It's a gift. And you know what the point of that gift is? The point of that gift is to show us, this is who you can become, right? This is who you can become. But that's not really us. Now, the mistake we make is that we feel like, oh my gosh, this is me right now, right? This is me. And then guaranteed what comes next is disappointment, right? That moment where the inspiration goes, and that is kind of like when we let go of the baby's hand, right? And the baby has to learn, and that is when we have to implement, right? We have to keep that vision of who we can become in our mind, and we have to work towards it, right? And that's stage 2. Now, then what happens is, if you follow the pattern, the original pattern is, what happened is the Jews went through that process, those 49 days. We'll talk a little bit more about the energy of those 49 days in a moment, but they went through those 49 days. And what did they arrive at? They arrived at Sinai, right, where they got the Torah, and they saw God. And so what was the difference between the Jews at the splitting of the sea versus the Jews at Sinai? It's a world of difference, right? Because the Jews at the Sinai, at splitting of the sea, that was God doing it to them, right? That was God giving them that image. When they came to Sinai, they came as people who owned it. They came as people who were now capable of having that direct communication from God, right? So the result of it is complete transcendence, right? And I'll give you an example that I think really shows it in the world, in the physical world. If you think about the birth of a baby, right? What goes into the birth of the baby? There's the father's part and there's the mother's part, right? Now, and then, you know, the father does his thing, the mother then does her prolonged, you know, 9 months birth, etc. And then what do you end up with? Do you end up with, what is a child? Is it 50% mum, 50% dad? Would you say that? We have 1 vote for yes. Anyone else? 50% mum, 50? No.
No.
What is it?
90%, 10%. I'm joking.
Sorry, 99%. But I'm saying, let's say you want to go there, 99% mum, 1% dad. But is it really? Is that what, if you think of yourself, are you 50% your mum, 50% your dad?
No, you make yourself after that.
You're a completely new being. You're a completely new human. And I think if you think about it, perhaps that is why we instinctively know that the miracle of a child is because, yes, the father's input and the mother's input, but what results is so much greater. We can't say, oh, that's 50% mum, that's 50% dad, or whatever percentages you want to say. It's a completely new being, right? The result is more than just the effort that you put in, and that's really what the effort of that's really what the Omer is. The Omer is that period of that phase 2, right, where you go and it's interesting because when we're counting the Omer, usually when we count towards something, right, how do we count? As you're counting towards a birthday, a holiday, what would you say? How would you count down? You count down, you say 20 days, 19 days, 18 days. The Omer, we do the opposite. We count day 1, day 2, day 3. Why are we doing that? Why are we counting up instead of counting down?
Achievement.
Yes, because our eye is on the goal, right? We have to be clear on the goal. But when we're in the process, we have to be in the process, right? And that's why every day we count day 1. Why? Because it's not that we're counting down. It's not that we're waiting for the thing to happen. It's that we are building up to it, right? So today I count day 1 because this is it. I have done day 1. I have done this step of the process, and this step is now mine. Right, and that I think it's a fascinating new way to look at being in the process. Because so often when we're in the process, we look at the process and think like, how far do I have to go until I get my goal? This is telling us no, it's a different way. Be in the process and celebrate your progress, right? You've done day 1, that's fantastic. This is day 1. You've done day 2. This is day 2, right? This is day 3. This is day 4 until we get to day 49. And what's fascinating about it is that yes, the excitement builds daily. But when is Shavuot? Does anyone know what day of the Omer is Shavuot? It's actually the day after, right? It's the day after. It's the 50th, and we don't count the 50th. Why? And it's the same thing what we spoke about in terms of like that child, is because the result is greater than the sum of its parts. And maybe this is something that you can resonate with. And I think I'll leave you with this. And I actually spoke to someone, and maybe I'll share her story afterwards, is maybe this is something that you resonate, is like sometimes we work towards a goal, right? And we don't even know what the end result's going to be. And we get there and we're like, I don't know, like, I can't even imagine that this is where I get. So I'll share with you a story. I was there's someone that I'm very close to, who a few years ago, her family was not doing Shabbat at all, and they started to become to incorporate Shabbat into their home a little bit more, into their family, and more her husband. She did it as well, but she came along for the ride. And I said to her, they had the journey over a few years, and I said to her last week, I was like, how's Shabbat going for your family? And she looked at me and she's like, it just is. It's just part of our routine. And I was like, wow, can you imagine 3 years ago that you would sit here with me and tell me Shabbat's just a part of what we do, right? When you were in that phase where you were thinking like, how much Shabbat do we do, right? And when you were negotiating with your spouse about what you do for Shabbat, or negotiating with your kids, or negotiating with yourself of how much of Shabbat you do, did you ever imagine that you would get to the place where Shabbat is just something that is part of what we do? Like, it's unimaginable. It's unimaginable. And that really is what that transcendence is doing, is that it's a new way of looking at how we move through life, right? It's not that we just wait for life to happen to us. We're not passive waiting for life to happen to us. We are actively building that pathway. And our focus has to be, yes, we have to have a goal. Yep, our goal is on getting to Sinai. And what's fascinating about the Omer is that each day has a different energy. Maybe we'll do this a little bit more next week, the energies of the Omer. But it's a process of self-development. It's a process of where we focus very much on becoming people that are able to receive this divine gift of the Torah. But when we're in the process, right, we are focusing very, very much on the fact that we are building day 1, day 2, day 3. And then when we get there, we will, please God, look back and say, wow, how did I even get here? Right? Because the result of what we get to is so much greater than the sum of our parts. Thank you for taking the time to listen. To schedule a complimentary discovery call with Gila, please email gilaross@gmail.com. You can also learn more from Gila on Instagram. It's Gila Ross. And please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. Have a wonderful day.